All right. Well, good morning, everyone. And we're going to light this candle and start with our second in our webinar series today, touching on social media and smartphone well-being. For those of you joining our webinar, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, it's always nice to know who all's joining us today. And I'm also sharing my slideshow, so you can at least follow along with that. And for the inevitable question, all slideshows will be shared as a follow-up, including Annie's when she gets on in a moment. So with that, I'm going to do some quick little table setting today, because today we have a great guest, Annie Margaret, who is co-founder and executive director with the Post-Internet Project. And of course, I am the board chair of Macro and the current workforce development program manager for Energy Outreach Colorado. And just to let some of you all know what Macro is and why we're focused on social media or smartphone well-being today. Macro is a community of non-traditional post-secondary workforce training organizations, K-12 post-secondary system partners, and workforce centers and organizations. And just digging into those non-traditional post-secondary organizations, these are the training apparatuses that are really developing the workforce for a lot of our in-demand careers these days, such as construction, skilled trades, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, transportation, service industry. And these non-traditional post-secondary training orgs incorporate a wide swath of organizations, from labor unions to trade associations to pre-apprenticeships to community colleges. So Macro just seeks to help bring all of these diverse folks together so that we can work in unison around career readiness. With that, I'm going to skip ahead to our mission statement, because the Macro approach really looks at the big picture when it comes to effective career readiness training and development of the workforce. Macro supports the community of career readiness organizations through cross-sector collaboration and connected to supportive resources in order to foster a more holistic development of the workforce. And that's really where the smartphone and digital literacy comes in here. Much of the Macro community is already well-versed in things like work-based learning and industry-recognized credentials. We at Macro believe that in addition to technical skills education, effective career readiness training should look towards the knowledge and skills needed for a person to not just receive that initial employment, but retain that employment, advance within their career field, and achieve work-life stability. And we believe that by combining the hard skills with things like soft, durable skills, financial literacy education, workers' rights education, mental health and physical well-being education, and social media smartphone well-being, these are the skills that contribute to being able to find that stability and retention and advance. And all of this philosophy just comes from my at least background in psychology and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Today in our webinar, we are going to be digging into the social media smartphone well-being education portion. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Historically, career readiness programs have treated digital literacy as a checklist of hard skills, such as formatting a resume, writing a professional email, or using basic software. Macro believes that the definition of what digital literacy education needs to entail must be expanded to account with our quickly changing and increasingly online world. Contemporary career readiness now requires mastering digital well-being, which involves understanding how modern digital content and apps such as social media and AI are engineered to affect our attention and our emotions. And a quick little anecdote here. We have Mac the Crow here to help illustrate just why this can actually be a safety concern for modern careers. This was a contractor I worked with in my role at Energy Outreach Colorado, who told me they had to finally let one of their workers go whose whole job was to be a safety spotter on a construction site. And here in the first image, you can see Mac the Crow as a safety spotter is doing what he's supposed to. He's attentive, he's paying attention to his colleague who is up performing work in a bucket truck and ready to sound the alarm if something bad happens. The second image, we see that Mac the Crow is, instead of focused on his colleague, he's distracted by social media. And that leads to the third image where Mac the Crow is going to get chewed out by his foreman. And depending on if this is the first or last time that he's done this, he might be sent to the bench permanently and be out of a job. Finally, in Colorado right now, there is some big laws and requirements taking place with education. So I want to clarify our stance before I hand off to our guest today. HB 25-1135, which is the Communication Devices in Schools Act, has required that public schools in Colorado adopt a policy concerning student communication device possession and use during the school day by July 1st, 2026. Macro supports school banning cell phones from the classroom. But we want to really emphasize that we strongly believe that a blanket cell phone ban without concurrent and intentional education about why cell phones need to be removed from the classroom, as well as the developmental dangers that predatory social media and misinformation pose to youth and adolescent development, will fall short of achieving the meaningful and beneficial change to education and outcomes for our learners that we are hoping to achieve. So with all of that table setting finally behind us, I'm going to hand off to Annie Margaret here, who is going to share her screen and take over. So Annie.
All right. Okay, ta-da, there we go. So thank you everyone for being here. Thanks Jordan for the opportunity and introduction. So I have been faculty at the University of Colorado Boulder, where I study the relationship between social media or excessive media consumption and our well-being. Okay, there we go. Takes me a minute to figure out where all the buttons are. There. Okay. So this program has been under development. I started focusing on this in 2014. So I was a bit perhaps ahead of the game. Now more and more people are working on this or worried about it at the very least. And so the point is, I've been doing this a long time. I put up just some of the places our program has been covered. And we have a publication coming out with some folks at Harvard and Stanford, hopefully in the next couple months. But just to kind of give some credibility to what's behind this. And our program offering from Post-Internet Project is called PRISM. Explain more about that in a moment. The reason I'm here today is because workforce readiness now includes attentional readiness. So as Jordan already said, super aligned with the macro initiative, but really asking, employers asking, can this employee focus? Can they listen? Can they regulate stress? Can they stay present long enough to actually learn? And I'll maybe tell a quick anecdote here. I work with some plumbers, and as one of my clients, I suppose, learning groups, and one of them came through, and the young gentleman was clearly very eager to do a good job, but could not actually listen. And you can see it immediately in folks, the kind of ping pong brain, and people's intent is there. They are trying to pay attention and actually can't do it. And so that's what we really seek to address with our program. Again, aligns with macro because holistic pathways, the way macro works and believes, need holistic supports. And so people don't need to succeed in technical content alone. They need their whole person supported to be able to really thrive in any workplace. Because while we may not talk about this openly a lot, there are internal capacities that underlie every job skill. And in fact, I would say just our ability to be human at all. So attention, our ability to choose where we focus our attention. Most people, employees and employers, have completely lost this skill. And I want to be clear because I'm going to say some really harsh things here. So before I get into the harshness, I want to say that I place the onus of responsibility on the tech companies. Okay, they knew what they were doing. They knew these platforms are addictive. They extract our attention intentionally to make money. Okay. That being said, I think if we all hold our breath and wait for some policy to get passed for us to all be freed from the attention economy, the extraction of our attention, we may die from holding our breath. So we need to make some choices. Attention is the first thing. Stress regulation. So this constant pinging of notifications releases cortisol. And so most humans on this planet right now, at least in developed countries with technology, are walking around with chronically elevated cortisol, just low-grade stress all the time, without really the proper education or tools about how to regulate that, and often are so disembodied or disconnected from their body that they don't even know they're stressed. And then the third piece, and this is the most important one to me, the most important to my entire nonprofit, to the PRISM program, is this sense of agency. Because we have been fooled into believing we have no power, when in fact, we do have power over our choices, and our choices do matter. But we have fallen so far from that that it takes structured time investment to recover that sense of agency. So that's, in a nutshell, what the program offers. I've been doing this a long time. I used to, in the early days, circa 2014, give lectures about why the phones are bad, because I was pissed, honestly. I was aware of what these big tech companies were doing. It did not seem to me that many other people were aware, and I was angry. So I myself used to give these kind of lectures. While they are cathartic, they are not necessarily super supportive for people actually getting where we want them to be. Everybody knows the feeling. You're tired, you're anxious, you're scattered, you're ping-ponging all over the place. And so what we need is a way to remove ourselves from that without shame. And I'll get to why that piece is really important. And so in the workforce and in training environments, the phone is not only a distraction, it can become a regulator, sort of like a pacifier, right? So we feel some uncomfortable emotion, stress, boredom, loneliness, avoidance of a task. And we can reach for the phone to soothe any of those things. So when people are tired, overwhelmed, uncertain, the phone is the easiest place to go to. It was intentionally designed to do that. It is intentionally designed to keep you hooked, but our program gives people a way to interrupt that loop without morally shaming themselves. And I also want to mention, I think we all know this, but this is not just a youth issue. I say this mostly because I do a lot of public speaking on the issue, and a lot of parent groups, counselor groups, everybody wants to say, oh, the kids need to blah, 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 while they're same stuff, doing the exact same thing. And so adults, apprentices, trainees, parents, supervisors, everyone is living inside this attention economy ecosystem. That's not the right word. It's not an ecosystem. That implies some level of health, then infrastructure. And so the specific habits may look different across different ages, but the familiar problem is underneath that. The algorithmic reward loops, the comparison, emotional overwhelm, et cetera. So we've spent, at this point, 8 years developing and refining this program. It works for most folks. So we have over, this slide is a little outdated. So at this point, we have 800 about adults who've gone through this program. We analyze using the Bergen Social Media Addiction Scale, which essentially asks questions about people's psychological relationship to media consumption. So it's not just good or bad, but people's relationship to their feeling about the media they're consuming, their feeling about their phone. And so based on that intake survey, that classifies people as either healthy use, problematic, SMU, as you're seeing on the slide here, just stands for social media use, and clinical social media use. And so if you look at the graph, the bottom axis, what you're seeing are the weeks in the program, where we have a week 0, that's the intake, and then 4 weeks of structured education, peer support, and behavior change. And so over those weeks, you can see that the folks who started in the problematic or clinical levels of use come down into the healthy range. That dotted line is sort of the cutoff for what's considered healthy use. Okay. So just saying, it's data backed. I have lots and lots of data. There's a link at the end to all of our research if you want to learn more. And then we also look at higher problematic social media use is associated with higher perceived stress, more anxious attitudes toward technology, and more negative agency. That means feeling like I don't have control or choice over my own life. That's the root issue. And because agency is central to workforce development, right? This is the feeling that I can do things in my life. And so PRISM is designed around that shift from automatic behavior, feeling like I'm being run by something else, to intentional behavior. I am choosing what I am doing. And so here's a few quotes I pulled. So I showed you all of that quantitative data, but I think the qualitative data is actually more impactful. Having read at this point in my career thousands of students' journal entries that they're journaling during this process, you can see that they're aware of the problem. Folks are aware. TikTok has me in a chokehold. I feel ashamed. I feel disappointed in myself, right? So the problem is they're now taking a system that was designed to extract their inner world, to extract their attention, and now they're turning it around and putting the blame on themselves. I'm ashamed. I feel guilty. I'm disappointed in myself. That is not okay. So what the program actually is an educational experience that takes place. I wrote here 5 to 8 weeks. It can be done in as little as 5. And we see the efficacy you saw on the slide is based on 5 weeks. However, I also do 8-week offerings because it can be nice. It can be beneficial to allow folks in that 5-week window to then have a couple weeks on their own, right? To really cement the behavior change in and then come back for one more meeting, right? So in these meetings, we have synchronous education and peer support, behavior change recommendations. That's where they're choosing their own. We have an AI built out that can help with that, but it's not necessary. It's really about them choosing it for themselves. But sometimes the AI can help with that ideation, right? Of what do I want to be doing? So it's not a detox. Detoxes don't work in the long run. Surprise. You get really excited when you're doing a detox and you're really motivated while you're doing it. And then once the detox is over, you go right back to the same patterns. Anyone who ever has done a detox will tell you this is often the case. So what this is a structured path back to agency, and it requires actually quite deep work. So this is a place where I like to tell an anecdote. I often ask students, because what we're doing here is reorienting our attention toward what gives our lives meaning, purpose, and joy. So a lot of times I'll ask a group of students, okay, one of the first activities in this course is write journal about a time your life felt meaningful, purposeful, and joyful. And I'm not kidding you. The first time I ask that question in any cohort, there are always multiple people who begin to cry because they don't know. They don't know the answer to that question, and they've never been asked. So yes, it is heartbreaking, but I don't bring that up to say we have to stay lost in that heartbreak, but that someone needs to be asking these questions, because that is part of why the phones are so appealing, is because we do not know what to orient our attention toward instead. Because if a detox is still focused on the phone, and so this is my classic example, if I say to you, don't think about a red elephant, don't think about a red elephant, don't think about a red elephant, don't think about it. What do you think about? Red elephant, right? And that's the same way phone detoxes work. Don't be on your phone. Put your phone down, put your phone down, put your phone down. What are you thinking about? How much I miss my phone? It doesn't work. But our program is pro-agency. So it asks, when do I reach for my phone? What am I feeling before I reach for it? What does it give me? What does it cost me? And where do I want my attention to actually be going? So as folks iterate through the program, One general trend, is another example anecdote here, is folks will stop being on their phone first thing in the morning. And then they start to notice, I have more energy in the day, in those first few hours, when I don't wake up and scroll immediately. Or they'll set the opposite intent. Okay, I'm just going to try to stop before bed. And then they'll start to sleep better. And so it creates this positive feedback loop where they get a little bit and then they think, okay, that feels good. Right? And now we can create this snowball effect where we're noticing the impact in our life instead of just being told what to do. PRISM works for anyone 18 plus who has media consumption habits that are negatively impacting their life. So adults, young people, really anyone. We encourage folks to reflect on their own social media habits and experiences. Again, a metaphor I use here is like food. So a lot of times when I hear other types of media interventions being offered, they're really like a diet, right? Just stop eating sugar or stop eating fat or whatever. But again, that won't work because each person is unique. So some people can eat gluten and other people can't. And some people can eat dairy and other people can't. And some people can watch the news and be okay and other people can't, right? And so it's really about getting to know oneself a bit so that you can begin to understand, these are the 3 that are really getting me, right? Or 2 or whatever they are. From that place, then we set the goals for behavior change. And then they learn the transferable skills necessary to maintain those healthy behaviors over time. So this is things like attention restoration and that sort of stuff. So to run the process top to bottom here, basically they start by observing. There's no judgment ever, no shame, just observing their own behavior. What is happening? When am I on the phone? What am I doing? Then understanding how that's impacting their life. So we have a structure called domains of life where they see, what is this taking from my family and friendships? What is this taking from my relationships? What is this taking from my health? What is this taking from my productivity? Right? So beginning to understand that. Then we choose new things. So this is where the joy and meaning and purpose comes in. Okay, when do I feel good? Okay, I feel good when I'm outside. I feel good when I'm painting. I feel good when I walk the dog. I feel good when I read a book, whatever it is. Choose those things, replace, and then practice. That's why the program has to be at least 5 weeks, because you need time to practice and you need peer support so that when you inevitably relapse in week 1 and week 2, there are people there to be like, yeah, this is hard, but we're in it together, right? A lot of this stuff is on my website, so I'll go over this quickly. But in short, just to say, we have clinical psychologists who've endorsed the program, and our methods align with the known efficacy of other addiction programs, in short. Generally don't like the word addiction. It's a bit disempowering, but it's what we have. And then here are some testimonials of what folks say after the program. So more value and attention. My connections have strengthened with my friends. I truly felt the benefits of being conscious. Wow. I am getting to a lot more healthy place, and I use it for fun and connectedness instead of distraction. Lots of people talk about how it shifts their relationship to social approval. And so you might say, oh, this is all warm and fuzzy, Annie, inside. Why does this matter for the workforce? Because attention restoration, because of Mac Crow, right? Great job, Jordan. Because it matters for professional readiness, for safety, for communication. A lot of times, I see this all the time with folks who start working with me. They want to pay attention and they actually can't. And so it's not that they're bad or doing something wrong, but they've become so disoriented. So I believe that why it fits in the workforce is fairly obvious. If you want to be safe, if you want to be able to communicate, if you want to be able to focus. And also thinking about apprenticeship learning. So I'm very interested in apprenticeship learning. I believe it's the future, really, because I grew up blue collar, and so I got a lot of blue collar friends. And they talk about how, folks come in to be a mechanic and they went to mechanic school, but they don't know how to fix a car. And they're like, we don't want to hire these young people. They don't know anything. And so I do, but the specific example I'm thinking of, they do say, well, if they would come and apprentice with us, I would be happy to teach them. But apprenticeship learning requires the ability to offer quality attention, to watch, to ask questions, to make mistakes, notice the mistakes, and then receive correction. So if someone's constantly being pulled into their phone, they're not only missing like educational content, but also all the informal learning that's happening in the shop or on the site. Skip a couple in the interest of time. These small shifts can become workforce habits. Again, to translate this concretely, so scrolling, instead of scrolling during a break, you take a walk, things like that. And now to the offerings, just in time, Jordan, as promised. So there are a few ways we can offer this. One is direct program delivery, 5 weeks, 60 minutes per week. I say minimum because that is when I show you the efficacy. I don't want to go lower than what I know will lead to the outcomes, right? But you can also do 75 minutes or more time per week. It has to be cohort based and it has to be the same people seeing each other each week because the social accountability piece is so important. It can be online or hybrid or in person. Option 2, and this one I find to be better, is facilitator training and licensing. So if you go the direct option, then I come in and facilitate, but it's one time only. And so then you're paying every time. Whereas if you do facilitator training and licensing, you have implementation guidance and you're licensed to deliver it internally within your organization. So basically I train the facilitators who would offer this within your career preparedness organization. And we also have, based on the data I show you, obviously built-in evaluation. So we're showing you what changed. We give pre and post surveys that measure concretely shifts in attention, stress, sense of agency, sense of meaning, and technology and behavior. So you're not just saying, at the end of the day, when you need to show the stakeholders, it's not just, oh, I think it worked. You have the pre and post are built into the assignments of the program. I'm going to skip this one, but it'll be there for those who want more detail on the side-by-side of the two offerings, the pros and cons, what if you're thinking about it, which is better for your organization. And so the next step is fairly simple. You can reach out to me to see if it's a fit. You can choose which model you want to move with. Then we'll set up a timeline. You can run PRISM, which I don't know if I ever said, stands for Personal Relationship to Information and Social Media. So I've been doing it so long, I forget I should define the acronym. That's what it is. And lastly, here are some resources for you. So these are all completely free. So the left QR code will take you to our research page where you can see all of the published research, and the right QR code will take you to my YouTube channel where I've started to upload videos. I want to be clear, I do not believe those videos will be effective in terms of actual behavior change. I do not believe it's very likely folks are going to be able to get a handle on excessive media consumption by watching 20 short YouTube videos. However, it does give potential clients a flavor of what my facilitation style is like, of what the program is like, of what they're signing up for. And so those are there for you to go check out. It's not the whole program, but I believe at this point I have weeks 1 and 2 uploaded. And so at this point, I will pause and see if there are any questions. Thank you for your time and attention.
So you mentioned that you've worked with a plumbing contractor. That's honestly an interesting thing. Can you give any kind of examples about how they even found you in the first place, or how it might be different working with a contractor versus implementing this training as part of a career readiness program?
Yeah, so with the contractor, I actually found them because they came to my house. It's the truth of it. And the way that ended up working is there are a small group. So because it was not one of these large, I forget what you call them when they're part of the big companies. It was a private, independent, so to speak. So it was very small. And so that head contractor had 3 or 4 young folks who were hired as part of that team and organization of plumbers. And so I could just meet with those 3 or 4 over Zoom for the 5 weeks and support in that way. Whereas if it's part of a more formal or structured career preparedness program, then it may make more sense for me to train the facilitators. For example, if you have cohorts coming through all the time, then if I train a facilitator, now you're licensed to teach that to as many cohorts as you want, rather than working directly with me. Because then each time, right? And my bandwidth is only so much. And I know that the facilitators also get a lot out of that, because I don't know how much time we have, Jordan, but I want to add one other thing, which is that you have to be living it to teach this, because human beings are evolved to sniff out, excuse my French, but bullshit very quickly. Humans, this is a career readiness, right? People can handle it, but they know when people are lying to them. And so if you're not living it yourself as the facilitator and you are still drained and ping-ponged and not focused, again, not your fault, but if you are being preyed upon by the systems that be, and then you go to try to facilitate, the folks you are attempting to teach will be able to see you're not living it. Why should I listen to you? Right? You don't seem any better off. You don't seem any more clear than I am, And so I know from doing the facilitator trainings, the facilitators do get a lot out of that, because then they are also asked to rise into this way of focused attention and being more clear with our sense of agency. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, Taylor, go ahead.
Yeah. So, Dr. Annie Margaret, I think that what you're doing is just so valuable. And I know that you kind of put an emphasis on maybe working with individuals who are in an apprenticeship program. I'm curious, have you worked with anyone who's offering pre-apprenticeship programs?
In short, no.
Okay.
Yeah. In short, no. But what I'll say to that is I taught college for the past 8 years. A lot of these students are what we call creative technologists, which is not exactly a trade per se, but they are learning fabrication. They are learning 3D printing. They are learning wood shop skills. They are learning soldering. Right. So it's not exactly what you're describing, but it is a lot of hands-on construction adjacent type things that these folks were doing. So some familiarity there.
Okay, cool. No, that's really awesome. So at Denver Workforce, our out of school youth program, we work with a pre-apprenticeship program that's about 6 weeks long in total. So I think that from the feedback that that we get from employers who are kind of hiring individuals between that 18 to 24-year-old age range, we've seen that sometimes employers do terminate these individuals for being on their phone because it is such a safety concern. So I'm just kind of thinking that I would really like to make a connection between you and maybe that pre-apprenticeship program that feeds all these other registered apprenticeship programs and employers in the Denver metro area, because if that's something that we could educate from such an early standpoint, I think that really might help their trajectory, if they do choose to pursue a registered apprenticeship opportunity or a career in the trades. I know my husband, he just finished a 4-year registered apprenticeship, and every time he gets a newbie that comes and works with him, sometimes he really does have to talk to them about being on their phone, especially if they're spotting on a forklift or whatever that looks like, just because it can be such a giant safety concern if someone is not aware of their surroundings and paying attention and stuff like that. But even like you mentioned, from a learning perspective, you're going to miss out on so much wonderful knowledge and education and experience if you're playing on your phone while someone's trying to teach you how to wire something up, bend conduit, X, Y, and Z, you know. But thank you for so much for your time today.
Yeah, I'll share one other thing. The other piece I didn't touch on that is important is the idea that it's values aligned media consumption. So you'll see that here. I'll pass along my Coursera course so that you can see this is offered on Coursera. I did that as the university asked me to. However, again, I'm not sure how effective that will be without the peer support. But one piece of this is really important is getting folks clear on what their values are.
Yeah.
So then they're internally motivated to not be on the phone, because you have to have some strong compass or direction for that to not be so enticing. And so, yeah, I just wanted to hit on that piece, is that a lot of what we do in the program is getting folks really clear on who they are and what they value. And then from that place, the phone becomes less important. And maybe one last thing is, if there are any folks listening to this who have cohorts in their workforce, it really is a cultural issue also. So when I would teach this in various settings, it really helps if there's continuity with those people, because the dominant culture we have now is that, you know, someday we're going to look back on this like we do now with smoking, right? Someday we're going to look back on this and be like, can you believe that they used to just let children be on phones? They used to just let people smoke in the airplane, you know, and we're not there yet, but we will get there. And so, but for now, it's very counterculture to be really off your phone. That's changing, but in a lot of workplaces. So I'm just mentioning that in terms of highest efficacy, it's useful if there is continuity within the whole workplace culture, that like everyone has agreed. We don't do that here, right? We know what our attention is worth, and we don't do that here.
Yeah, so this discussion actually got me thinking, when Taylor mentioned pre-apprenticeships, I know that a lot of pre-apprenticeships that focus on the trades and construction have intentionally incorporated physical well-being as part of their curriculum, because it is tough on the body to do a lot of these trades. So before they even start their education for the day, they all get in their cohorts and they stretch with each other. When you were explaining your process, I was kind of thinking, oh, this sounds like just creating that internal framework for people to know how to be safe. Is that a fair thing to say, that it might be a good way to think about the education from PRISM as being kind of like figuring out it's important to stretch so I don't hurt myself physically before I'm on the job site?
Yes, I think absolutely. It's attentional training is really what it is, just like physical training, right? If we're going to go do a physically demanding job, we need to make sure our body is warmed up. If we are going to go do anything, and especially something where we need to focus, we need to make sure our mind is warmed up, or that we have the ability to focus, that we know who we are and what our attention is worth truly, so that so that it's not so easily extracted, right?
Mm-hmm. Very well said. Any other questions from our audience today? Well, Annie, thank you so much for joining us today. We will distribute this out. Hopefully we can help connect some trainings and organizations to you. And thank you so much for, honestly, I started thinking about this as a component of career readiness education over a year ago. I think, yeah, we're coming up on about a year when I sent you my long email, just like, folks, Annie is the only person I could find in Colorado who's like fighting back, trying to do something about this. And that's just so inspiring. And I hope that we were able to give you a platform to continue doing that work, because we need it.
Thank you, Jordan. Thanks everybody for listening.
All right, we're signing off. Thank you, Macro.